Welcome back. Moving on to our first segment for today. Well, we are talking about one of the most important sites for anyone who would like to learn more about ancient culture, history, and civilization. Abydos, of course, is the best place to start from. Well, we have new discovery that took place in Abydos. We are talking about 2,000 mummified ram heads. To discuss this in more details, we have with us Mr. Ihab Kamel, tourist expert and researcher in Egyptian antiquities. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
So first of all, I'd like to shed the light on these the 2,000 rams mummified heads. Tell us more about them and to which era it belongs to.
Well, these 2,000 rams, they belong to the Ptolemaic period, so they are considered to be, in comparison to the ancient Egyptian history, relatively new. But the surprise is not really the discovery of the rams, but the place where they discovered because the ram cult, or the cult of Mendes, the ram was not practiced in Abydos. It was practiced further north, in a place in the northwest of the delta, and that's where the ram Mendes was worshipped, and we had found a huge temple over there. But to find it in Abydos, it seems to be that the cult was practiced there side by side with the cult of the god Ammon that had reached Abydos. If you would know that the main deity of Abydos was supposed to be Osiris, because according to the ancient Egyptian cult, the head of Osiris, when his body was cut into 14 pieces, was thrown in Abydos, and that's why Abydos became the place of pilgrimage to the ancient Egyptians. That is why we consider this discovery to be quite important, and it gives us an idea about how the cults had developed throughout the different historical epochs until we had reached the Ptolemaic period to find such a cult practiced in a place like Abydos.
So from here we understand that they have the same rituals or the practice taking place in several places, not that it was moved.
We can't tell why this cult was introduced or how it was introduced to Abydos, that came all the way from the north to Abydos. That's quite a long distance. This is something which research will answer in the next 3 years, especially that the discovery is quite recent. However, we can say that it wasn't something strange that we would find a cult that would move from a province to be introduced in another cult. And where we're going to go far, in Thebes, from the beginning of history, the cult of Thebes was the cult of the god Muntu, the god of war. Starting from the early Middle Kingdom, the cult of Muntu had started retreating north until it became centered in Permont, or Armant, as we call it with the modern name, and the cult of Ammon had displaced that cult completely until Ammon became the king of gods of Thebes. So it's quite normal, and it happens. But what are the reasons behind this? This is what we need to know with digs and research and other things.
Were there other discoveries along with this main discovery?
Oh yes, usually these discoveries are mostly mummified animals. But the question is, why did the ancient Egyptians mummify animals? We have to understand that for every deity, he had a sacred animal. What is the meaning of sacred animal? The animal where the spirit of the god manifests inside. And that is why this animal was considered to be the sacred animal. That's the form which the gods manifests inside, and he can commute with the humans through. Of course, the god is not going to appear in his divine form to the humans, so he used to use this, like the ram for the god Mendes, like the ram or the goose in the case of Ammon-Ra, etc. That's why this favorite animal to the god, which the god manifests inside, they became kind of sacred and respected in the area where the cult is practiced. So after their death, They used to mummify them and bury them with a great deal of respect around the temple.
I think we have a temple that is dedicated to these animals as well.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
yes, many
Oh, it's
places.
an amazing one.
In Saqqara, you have the Serapeum. It's dedicated totally, it's a gigantic tomb for the Apis bull. And these Apis bulls were buried inside magnificent, huge sarcophagi, which are a masterpiece of art and architecture. And you can find them still over there. So this is part of the ancient Egyptian beliefs. And you will find that in many other temples. Because simply, you will notice that all the deities, they had sacred animals. They never, ever manifested to the humans in the divine form. There's always this barrier between the divine world and the human world.
I think the giving rituals as well meant a lot to that era, or to all of the ancient pharaohs. I mean.
Of course, this is the beauty of the ancient Egyptian cult. The cult that had developed liturgy. Look at the liturgy that they read from. It had developed through thousands of years. Tell me what other cult thousands of years ago had such a complicated liturgy related to certain rituals that took place. But mainly you will notice that all the rituals, they have lots of things in common, like burning the incense, for example. Why burning the incense? Because the Egyptians believed that the gods or the deities, they do not really eat the offerings which they present, either food offerings or whatever. They just have joy. They rejoice looking at them. But the real food of these divine spirits, it's the incense burned, the lovely aroma that result from burning the incense. That's what feeds the spirits. So you will notice that there are lots of common rituals, offerings presented, burning the incense because you're feeding the gods. The gods feed on that. But for every deity, it has also its special rituals. And that's the beauty of the ancient Egyptian cult, which is something very sophisticated and very complicated as well.
Well, talking about this discovery taking place in Abydos, well, as I mentioned in the beginning, Abydos is one of the most important sites. Really, it can tell a lot about the ancient history. So, will this shed the light more on this important site as a touristic site to attract more people to visit the place and to find out more about the temple over there?
Abydos is the beginning of the Egyptian history.
Yes.
Don't forget that King Menes was buried in Abydos.
But usually when we talk about ancient history and talk about temples and monuments, usually people are attracted to the most famous ones. I mean, the classical tours, sightseeing tours.
True.
But Abydos is, as I mentioned again, if you want to learn really about ancient history, you have to start from there.
Of course. Abydos has got, as a site, the site of Abydos is not only the temple of Seti I and Ramses II. No, there are lots of things. We have the Osirian, which dates back up to the archaic period. We have Shunet Zebib, that's the cemetery of the first and second dynasty kings. We have the temple of Seti and Ramses II, and this temple, it's a huge and in my opinion, it's the most beautiful temple among all the Egyptian temples. If you look at the art and the craftsmanship, it's something also very spiritual. Not many people know that Ramses II has a separate temple inside the village of Abydos itself. So, yes, it's true. Abydos has got a lot to offer, especially that we have, if we had started looking under the temple of Abydos, we will definitely find earlier temples because
I'd like to shed the light on more if anyone is visiting this beautiful site.
Yes, they do. They do. They do since a long time, but it's only a one-day trip.
Yes.
Because the tourists...
What do they expect to see?
they expect to see, usually, because the trip is quite short, the temple of Seti the First and Ramses the Second. This temple is by all means a masterpiece in art and architecture.
Very well preserved, I believe.
Very well preserved, and unfortunately what we see, this huge temple that we see, this is only the part left, which is the earlier part belonging to King Seti, with some remains from the Ramesside period. But the importance of this temple is that is the only temple that shows one of the ruling Egyptian pharaohs being deified and worshipped as a god during his lifetime. In the temple of Abydos we have 7 shrines, each shrine dedicated to one of the deities, or like what we call sanctuary or holy of the holies. 6 of them are for 6 deities. The 7th, you will notice that it's for Seti the First. That is why you will notice that in all the other shrines, it's Seti the First presenting offerings to the gods, except the 7th shrine. It's Ramses the Second dressed as a high priest presenting offerings to his father. So he was worshipped as a god in this place. The people there, when they come, they'd like to see everything. They'd like to see it. The temple, they like to see the famous kings' lists, which is located in the temple. That contains the 76 kings starting from the 1st dynasty until the 19th. Of course, the legitimate kings from the point of view of the ancient Egyptians. Of course, there were more than that, but they removed the Hyksos kings, Akhenaten, any pharaohs who there was a kind of debate about their legitimacy and all of that. And they see the Osiris, but I think Abydos needs more time. Abydos needs a couple of days. But the problem is that the touristic infrastructure in Abydos, or in Sohag in general, it's not up to the standard. In the 90s, we used to do bus tours that used to start from Giza all the way to Abu Simbel. And we used to stay before we reached Luxor in 3-star hotels, because that's what was available at the moment. Nowadays, this cannot work. We need better hotels, we need better roads, we need hospitals, we need facilities on the way, because services, because we are driving 1,000 kilometers. And I hope that these bus tours would return back again, because they were attracting lots of people, especially that they used to work in winter and summer, even in the off seasons. And the people who were interested in ancient Egyptian civilization and antiquities, they used to come and join these bus tours. And let me tell you, that was a very rich product, which unfortunately, because of some interior problems, it had stopped for a while. But hopefully we can restart this kind of product again.
Well, talking about these discoveries that are taking place, usually, as we have seen recently, that the people all around the world, the holiday makers, they are following with all these discoveries and talking a lot, especially through social media. And since we started also the idea of using this in our promotional campaigns, working throughout the excavation, throughout the discovery, we let people with us. We tell them about the discoveries minute by minute, and even the development projects that are taking place. So they are keen to visit and to find out more about it. How do you see this?
I think that this is something very practical. If you ask me my opinion, I would say that I'm totally against spending too much money on promotional paid campaigns, because it's already known that it's paid campaign. I believe always in changing the image in the back of the mind. New discoveries, new events taking place, media coverage,
Word of mouth.
without interfering or saying anything that would indicate our wish that to attract visitors. On the contrary, this will express itself. The people abroad will see it and they will say, everything is going fine. Changing automatically the negative image in the back of the mind of the receptor abroad, this what will bring him to visit Egypt. And this, I said this before in 2019 when we were organizing the African Nations Cup. I said, this is not a championship. I believe that it's going to attract lots of people, and Egypt will retrieve back its touristic season, which it had lost since 2011. Not many people believe me. I said, no, it will happen. The BBC was showing everything. My friends abroad, they said, come on, we came because we saw that everything was fine. The people are taking their children to the stadiums. The streets are busy with people.
But we were the center of attraction of the whole world.
Yes, it had shown the day-to-day life, that everything is safe. So this changed the negative image in the mind of the receptor without spending that much money on publicity. The people came and we had an excellent season. I think we had 12 to 13 million visitors at that time. This is what we should work on. Events, broadcasting events, relating Egypt to every positive incident or event or something that's happening. That what will bring travel business to Egypt. Not really the paid campaigns. A paid campaign is a paid campaign. That's already known as a paid campaign.
Well, talking to some of the holiday makers or different nationalities who are visiting Egypt and visiting the Abydos area in particular, usually they are impressed with something. There is something that is really impressive for them, or they ask about, what is this thing about?
The very spiritual atmosphere you feel in Abydos. As I said, this place was the place of pilgrimage. And you can feel that the practice of the ancient Egyptian cult in this temple was different from anywhere else. Because you had 7 cults practiced over there. 6 deities with their set of priests, 6 different sets of liturgy, and 6 different sets of rituals. And the 7th, it's dedicated to Seti the First, with a practiced cult. So he had a set of priests. So the spiritual atmosphere was very busy, was very rich, and you can still hear it. Then the art, the carvings of the bas-relief on the walls, it's perfect. Because the temple is built out of limestone. Most of the temples, they are built out of sandstone, and they're colored sandstone, and maybe they would put a layer of stucco and they paint on it. In Abydos, no, this was built of limestone, and all the carvings were done straight on limestone, which makes the place artistically impressive and spiritually impressive. The place where you see the beginning of the site itself. It's the beginning of the Egyptian civilization as we know it in mythology, and in reality that's where King Menes is buried, and that's, according to mythology, that's where the head of Osiris was buried. That's the place of pilgrimage to the ancient Egyptians. And it's covering several historical periods, so by all means the people, they get really so overwhelmed when they get to the place, and they get speechless. It's an amazing sight. Unfortunately, as I said, people don't get the chance to spend even one night in Abydos.
Actually, I've been there several times, and every time I go there, I feel the same as you mentioned, as if it's the first time, impressed, attracted to history. Just the fact that sometimes you can feel it, you can listen it, something like this, really very, very spiritual.
Oh yes, it is. It is, and everyone knows the story of Dorothy Eady and how she got attracted to the place, leaving Britain and staying over there, Seti, the one who's known as Seti. the place for her, she could not really, and it's still up to now an unexplained story, but the spirituality of the place had attracted her, and she stayed there all her life. Been going to this temple since more than 30 years, and it's still the same feeling. It's still the same beauty of the place. You feel that the place is very peaceful. Maybe because it was the most sacred place to the Egyptians, the place of their pilgrimage. I don't really know.
Right. Mr. Ihab Kamel, tourist expert and researcher in Egyptian antiquities, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Right, moving on to a quick break, then we'll be back.